So we've been speaking about angels quite a bit. We spoke about how angels can appear to us. This is a very last theme. How can they can appear to us, and how those who are gifted or who can develop specific methods, some of which we spoke about, can sometimes see them. We previously spoke about the types of angels, that there are the angels that are created for us. There are angels that are created for the world, some of which come just very temporarily, some of which are permanent. There are angels that we can create through our own mitzvot. Every time we create a mitzvah, we perform a mitzvah, an angel is created, and vice versa. Also, when we deviate, we can create a bad angel that can be erased through teshuvah. So we've been speaking quite extensively, as we said, about angels. Let's just continue where we left off, middle of page 9. Does anyone want to read? Thus, when the prophet... Yes, please, Sue, go for it.
His experience of seeing an angel. The description verges on the hearing and fantastic. Terms like winged creature of heaven or eyes of the supreme chariot can be only a pale and inadequate representation of the experience, because this experience belongs to another realm with another system of imagery.
Right.
The description will of necessity tend to be anthropomorphic.
Right.
But when, as we know, the angel whom the prophet describes as having the face of an ox does not have any face at all, and certainly is not that of an ox. Its inner essence, seeking elucidation and reflection within material reality, may express itself in a way that shows a certain likeness between the face of an angel and the face of an ox, as the expression of known spiritual qualities.
Right. So obviously we're speaking about a very abstract world, an abstract world in which the imagery is very different than the imagery of this world, because it doesn't have necessarily any limits. The imagery has no boundaries or definitions. It really is the same way maybe we can perceive air, and even more so is the way that in those worlds those angels are perceived. Now, nonetheless, yes, prophets do speak about seeing the wings of angels or the face of an angel that appears like an ox, like Ezekiel says. What they're really describing is not a picture of an ox, as we know it to be here in this world. What they're describing is one of two things: either the character trait of the angel, which is like the character trait of an ox, and sometimes that's what God himself does also. We apply to God all sorts of images, even though, of course, God is the most abstract. God can't be limited into any picture. In fact, Maimonides even says that it is prohibited to draw God, because by drawing God, you will have limited him into an image. So you have to be careful with that. And yet, God describes himself as, for example, compassionate. Or God himself, in the Torah says that he appeared in fire. He appeared in fire. That God is an all-consuming fire. So 1 second. So why are you using images if nothing can contain you? Not even a fire can contain you, can confine you, or can describe you. And the answer again is we're speaking of character trait. God can be all-consuming like fire. He is all-consuming like fire. He's all-pervasive like fire. That's one. And same with angels. When we speak about the ox, we saw an angel with the face of an ox. So we're speaking about the character trait of an ox, which is maybe a little bullish or very persistent. That's why the image of an ox for an angel. That's one. Another reason why there are images that are attached to angels is not necessarily to describe the character traits, but rather to speak about the Kabbalistic lines from which they come. So in general, and I don't want to get too sophisticated here, but in general, if you go to Ezekiel, you'll see that there are 4 lines of angels that maybe most angels come from. Those 4 lines, also the 4 wheels of the Ezekiel's chariot. One of them indeed is like an ox, the other one is like a wolf, eagle, and the 4th evades me, forgot. But these are the 4 wheels or the 4 lines, the 4 categories of angels. Now, these categories not only have character traits, but these categories also have powers or manifestations, I would say. So the line of the ox has a manifestation that is, at least as described in Ezekiel, it is very controlling, very authoritative. While the line of an eagle is actually the opposite. It's very alluding. It's more mystical also. It's more heavenly. So they have different manifestations. So again, when we see, if you're lucky enough ever to actually see an angel, then you probably won't see an image, but you'll see a character trait and you'll see the manifestation of its mission. And then when you'll go and describe to a friend, hey, you won't believe I just saw an angel, then in order for you to explain how that angel looks like, you'll have to use some type of image from this world. But you'll want to explain, again, both the character trait and the mission or the manifestation that this angel had. And this is exactly what the prophets do with these angels. This is what God himself does very often with his own manifestations and character traits, that he borrows an image from this world so that we can relate to it. Or in the words of Rashi, Lo dibra Torah ela kilshon bnei Adam, that the Torah speaks in the human language so that we can understand it. But really, it is not the human language. It is the divine language masked in the human language. So that's true for angels. I just want to go, yes, sir.
Can we have seen an angel and not known it?
Oh, good question. Yes, especially if that angel can appear in the form of a human being. There are angels, like we see in the Torah itself. Abraham was visited by 3 human beings that turned out to be angels. Now, sometimes you bump into a human being, and he looks like a human being, like as they say, he walks like a duck, he talks like a duck, and that's so you say to yourself, he must be a duck. Well, he's not, he's an angel. Now, so it could very well be. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes souls come down to this world and they appear as such. I think I told you the story about how in 2014, I know a soldier was there, but during the Gaza war, soldiers who invaded Gaza were greeted by this Arabic woman who became their guide, said to them, don't go into this place, go into that place. This place has bombs, they'll explode. And she turned out to be accurate. She was speaking the truth to save their lives. And at the very end, she just disappeared. They couldn't find her. And they went to one of the great Kabbalists, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, of the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel in the 1980s. He's truly a holy man. And he said to them that they saw Rachel, our mother, Rachel Imeinu, and she's the one who came down from heaven to guide them and save them so that they wouldn't walk into booby-trapped homes. So sometimes you have angels like that and human beings, souls like that come in shapes of human beings. Are we aware of it at the time? Probably not. Most of the time, no. I think only the fortunate are. Yes.
So she was flesh and
blood. She looked like an Arab woman.
But they could touch her. She wasn't an apparition. She was.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know if they touched her, but yeah. So yeah, very often, I mean, if we're not at the level of angels, or not of angels, that's wrong, because we're higher than angels, essentially. But if we haven't refined ourselves, then we can't necessarily see the angels that come to us, even though they do.
Rabbi, did Tzaddikim talk about see angels more often than the average person.
Yeah, those who see angels don't really talk about
They
it.
don't, right.
Yeah, they could make side comments. I know that there's a story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, blessed memory, who during one of his Hasidic gatherings, one of the Farbrengens, they were called, someone appeared and no one knew who he was, and the Rebbe said, leave him alone, he came from another world. Yeah, yes.
Because an angel doesn't have physical ability.
Yes. Right.
Save someone in a certain situation, would the angel get understanding about his body? Because we say, oh my God, this person was an angel, so he can.
Right.
Or always talking to you.
So it's a good question. Angels will protect you without needing to get into your body. But there is a concept called dibuk, which is a whole different story. But that is when sometimes a soul from another world or from another branch, so to speak, comes into you. And sometimes they come into you for you, or sometimes they come into you against you. So there is that concept of souls cleaving to souls. But angels, no. Angels stay outside of you. Angels can do what they do without needing to go into you. And maybe the reason also is because we're higher than angels, as we said. So the angels can't really get to our level. So they have to stay outside of it because we're too far away for them. Yes, Amy.
Discussed or talked about an aura you might have around you when there's an angel present or angels present. Is that part of this? Can you talk a little bit about this aura?
Yeah, look, yes. I mean, there are many factors that contribute to the aura of a person, not just angels. Angels maybe is one factor, but there are other factors. And I think that in many ways, the Talmud says that, speaking of angels, that how do you know if you should drink the words of a teacher? Maybe none of you should be here, actually, because the Talmud says that if your teacher looks like a Malach Hashem Tzevakot, an angel of God, then Kabel Torah Mipiu, then you should learn from him. If not, from his mouth. If not, Al Tekabel Torah Mipiu. Don't receive Torah from his mouth. Now, how do you know how an angel looks like?
You have an angel.
No, okay. How do you know? No. So there are things that contribute to an aura, and I will tell you. I think that multiple things. First of all, yes, there are things that cannot be seen, but let's first speak about the things that can and should be seen. First of all, if a person's life is in sync with God, in sync with God, with his commandments, with what God wants of him, not just what he wants of God or she wants of God, that's one big way of knowing. Another way of knowing is indeed if that person is an aura. Now, it's different, the word for aura in Hebrew is an interesting one. The modern Hebrew word is different. The modern Hebrew word is hilah. I don't know if that comes from biblical Hebrew. Does it? Hilah. But no. Hey Yud Lamed. Hey, Nachon. Hilah. But in Talmudic language, it's interesting. It's actually called Zohar, just like Kabbalah, the foremost book of Kabbalah, Zohar. And Zohar means this light that comes from a reflection, not from a person's own light. In other words, that a person is reflecting that which is greater than him. Not reflecting his ego, he's reflecting God, to put it that way. Person is reflecting the light of God, not the light of himself. That's what Zohar really means. So that contributes to the aura of a person. And then yes, you have angels. And I think that the more mitzvahs you do, the more angels you have, and the more they contribute, as we were speaking about in a few classes ago, the more they contribute to your aura too. I will say that the word aura itself in English has always fascinated me because I also think it comes from light. Aura in Hebrew means light. So maybe that's where it's borrowed from. Who knows? But it's a light that's reflected, not a light that is created. You know, in other words, you're reflecting God's light. Yes, sir.
Can an animal be an angel?
Can an animal be an angel, or can an yeah, I mean, can, just like we said, right? Angels can appear in human beings, can they appear in angels, in animals, sorry. There are, look, how would I know? I know what the Tanakh says, right? What the Bible says. And in the Bible, they have the imagery of animals, but there isn't a story of, it's not like Abraham, as I mentioned, right? That 3 human beings came, but they turned out to be angels. I don't think there's a story in the Tanakh and the Bible where animals carried the souls of angels. So I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But your dog is definitely an angel. He's higher than an angel, no? Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the
Yes.
question, like this parsha, at the end of this parsha, it talks about Moshe with the light after seeing
Right.
encountering Hashem. Is it kind of what you described, like reflecting His holiness, rather than coming within, kind of?
Yeah, very good. Excellent. I think that's a great example. And that's the aura that we're speaking about. So at the end of this week's portion, Moses comes down with the second set of tablets, and his face is shining so much, or his aura is so strong, that he has to wear a misveh, as it says, a mask. Karan or penei Moshe, because the light of Moses shone so strongly. By the way, Karan, same word as Karen, your daughter, Karan means shine, but it also means a horn. And I think that's also why many people think that Jews have horns, because it says that Moses, Karan, as if to say Moses had a horn. It really means that his light shone, but they don't know that. So anyway, maybe that's where it comes from. But yes, and Moses came down from the mountain after being with God for 40 days and 40 nights and receiving the second set of tablets. So really, when he came down, he was carrying all of that. So therefore, reflecting the Torah, reflecting the intimacy with God, reflecting God himself. That's really what the aura here is all about. And that's what we explained. Yes. Good point. Yeah. Anyway, so going back to that imagery that either speaks of character traits or of the missions, the manifestations of the missions that the angels have in this world. Let's continue. Page 10, unless there's other comments, please, I welcome them. Comments, disagreements. Beth, you've been studying for 40 years, Kabbalah, so I'm sure you have a lot to add to this class. Yes.
Abstract, formless spiritual reality in the vocabulary of human language. Although to be sure, there may also be a revelation of an angel in quite ordinary form, clothed in some familiar vessel and manifested as a normal phenomenon in nature. The difficulty is that one who sees an angel in this way does not always know that it's an apparition, that the pillar of fire or the image of a man does not belong entirely to the realm of natural cause and effect. And at the same time, the angel, that is to say, the force sent from the higher world, makes its appearance and to a certain extent acts in the material world, being either entirely subject to the laws of our world or operating in a sort of vacuum between the worlds in which physical nature is no more than a kind of garment of some higher substance.
Right. Let's just stop there, for example, and then we'll have a biblical example coming up. But I do want to connect this. Actually, I think, of course, there is no coincidence. But to Purim coming up tomorrow night. And by the way, everyone is welcome. Please join us at 7 p.m. here for the party of the town and the Megillah reading. And we'll have more Megillah readings the next day on Friday. So please do join us. But it's interesting because when you study the story of Purim, which is one big miracle, it seems that it's just a natural story with natural consequences. But if you look deeper into it, not only do you see God's hand in it, but you also see all sorts of angels appearing from nowhere. Maybe the most famous is Charvona. If you heard of the word Charvona, well, he's mentioned in the story of Purim. And Charvona appears when Esther is in the middle of telling Achashverosh, her husband, the king, that your advisor, Achashverosh, Haman, wants to exterminate my people. Of course, the king becomes livid and he says, what? My advisor wants to exterminate you, my wife, the queen, Esther, and your people? And at that moment, an angel comes in the form of a human being. Or at least so we believe that he was an angel. His name is Charvona. Charvona acted as an advisor to the king, or at least was dressed up like another advisor to the king. And then he says, hey, you should know, not only does he want to exterminate your wife and her people, but he actually put the plans in play already. He has a tree waiting in his backyard to hang Haman on. And that's when Achashverosh loses it completely, and he says, okay, well then let my evil advisor, let this Haman be hung on this tree. He brought Achashverosh to that tipping point. That's what the Malach does. Now, it's interesting because he may not have appeared as an angel, certainly not to Achashverosh, maybe to Queen Esther, certainly not to Haman, but he was this angel acting in a very, very powerful way. And maybe this is also why his name in the Megillah, a name that appears only in the Megillah, doesn't appear in any other book, is Charvona. Charvona comes from the word, as the sages point out, cherev, which means a sword. Charvona, cherev. And because his mission, again, we name the angels based on their missions. His mission was to bring death to Haman, to kill Haman, almost like a sword. Now, why am I saying this? Because, as Beth just read, Rabbi Steinsaltz puts it so beautifully that sometimes the angel makes its appearance and to a certain extent acts in the material world. But although he acts in the material world, he is not from the material world. He's just here to move things around, to almost create or to reorder things, to realign things. So it's fascinating to me also that we're reading this just before Purim, when Purim is filled with stories of angels. We just have to look for them, and there you'll find them. But they come here and they act and they realign things, and they have their own missions, and they appear as their missions are or as their character traits are. And sometimes we don't have a choice but to allow them to do the work. We can't interfere. Sometimes they want our partnership, so they call upon us to do all sorts of things also. But they are here to act in this world, whether with our agreement or without. Yeah. But let's go to this biblical example, I think, powerful in the Bible, Manoach. Beth, why don't you continue? Maybe just a little bit more, yeah?
Father Samson sees the angel in the image of a prophet, yet he senses in some inexplicable way that it is not a man he sees, that he is witnessing a phenomenon of a different order. Only when the angel changes form completely and becomes a pillar of fire does Noah recognize that this being, this marvel, which he has seen and with whom he has conversed, was not a man, not a prophet, but a being from another dimension of reality. That is to say, an angel.
Right, and even then, Manoach was quite lucky, because at least he saw that the human being that he was interacting with, who came to tell him that despite all odds, that they will be blessed with a child, even though they were barren, him and his wife, despite all odds, that that still an angel can change nature, right? So you'll be blessed with a child, but the angel didn't appear like an angel at the beginning. Only at the end, he was lucky enough to see that indeed this was an angel, because he turned into a pillar of fire. But at times, we don't see that they turn into pillars of fire. We don't see that they're angels. And we live maybe into our very last day thinking that, oh, I remember that weird story that happened to me, and I saw this person, and maybe it was just a person. Until the very end, we go into our graves with those doubts, but we actually encountered angels. Not always do we actually have that full revelation that, oh, this was an angel, like Manoach had in his own personal story. But I think that if we have just maybe the common denominator between all angelic stories, and maybe this is one thing that can help us decipher angels. Common denominator is that in every encounter with angels in the whole Tanakh and in other places, in Talmud, etc., where we read about angels appearing, those angels appearing always cast doubt on the humanity to the people that they're appearing to. In other words, if you encounter an angel, something in you will tell you that something different about this person. You might point to the fact that he or she is an angel, or you might just leave it at that and say, okay, fine. Some people are weird, and you just dismiss it. But in all stories of angels, you'll see that there is always some level of suspicion that people have when they encounter those angels. So just like Manoach, just like the story, and just like Charvona, and just like others. But maybe that's God's hint, and maybe that's the only hint we'll ever have.
Question.
Yes.
When you're talking about angels that appears like humans, do they come just for a certain mission and disappear, or they are like this, like they are like shapeshifter and remain for the rest of their life?
Right. That's a great question. How long do they come for? Right. Usually, I mean, at least from the stories of the Tanakh, usually they come really for a short period of time. For permanent periods, God doesn't send angels. God sends really souls. I think the souls of the righteous, that's their role in the world, to be those permanent guides, those permanent angels. But angels typically come just for a short period of time. Could be a few days, a few weeks even, but I don't know if more than that. Yeah. Yes.
A good example would be, say somebody's in a burning car and this human person pulls them out and then they
Disappears.
never find. That probably would be like be an angel, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. 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 Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. I have a dear friend in Mexico City who had a plane crash. And he was rescued from a burning plane by 3 people who he never met before, and he's convinced that they were angels. Could very well be. He was in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. Yes.
Confusing to me because it's my understanding that every time we do a mitzvah, we create an angel in the next world. And I thought they hang around because when my mother died, I was doing all these angels and I didn't know why. She needed to die and she didn't want to die. And I was in the studio, I was doing these huge angels and I didn't know why. And then I was looking at the book and they said, well, she created all those angels. So then I told her that she has all these angels because they did a lot of mitzvah. And when you're ready to die, put up your hands and all the angels that we both created will take you to heaven. She died that night. She died. And I did this painting the night she died.
Wow.
And you can see it looks like a death mask. I'll bring it.
Wow.
Her hands are out. But I thought they were hanging around. Not true.
Yeah, they are hanging. So when we create a mitzvah, we have an angel that was created by that mitzvah that is with us in this world too. And not just and then when we transition to the next world, the angel continues with us into the next world. There are those angels. There are angels also that God sends at the time of our death, of our transition. He sends because those are angels that have a mission to escort souls. There are angels also that God sends to every person lying sick. an angel that comes to heal that person. In fact, we spoke about this, but even halacha, the code of Jewish law, tells you that these angels are 3 angels to every sick person that stand by the person's head. And that's why you're not allowed to stand there when you visit a sick person, because there are angels like that too. So I would say every hospital room is, especially those hospital rooms where people are dying, or hospices, let's say, are quite stuffed with angels, because you have angels of healing, you have the angels of transition, you have the angels of mitzvahs that the person performed. So you really have millions of angels. Yeah. You know that there's a custom. I mean, even the Code of Jewish law speaks about this, that when a person passes on, you have to open the window, or at least the door if there's no window in the room. And the reason they say it is so that you can allow the soul to leave. But you're not just allowing the soul to leave, you're also allowing the angels to leave with the soul. So you open the window. That's really what it represents. So we really believe that. After, yeah.
Why are there 3 angels?
That's a great, why not 1, right? Or 2 or whatever. Why 3? So the path of healing, in fact, any blessing that a person receives goes through 3 channels. Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at, which is the 3 intellectual, or the 3 attributes that lie at the crown of a person. As the crown of a person, Kabbalistically, you have it in the Kabbalistic chart that you showed us before, but it's wisdom, intelligence, and knowledge. I think that's how they translate it. But all of our 7 attributes, everything about us really goes through those 3 attributes. And we say that each of those 3 angels really comes to take care of each of those 3 attributes. Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at. Yeah, good question. So Chokhmah is wisdom, Binah would say is intelligence, and Da'at is knowledge. It's inaccurate translations, but that's the closest you can get. Da'at is not just knowledge. Da'at, I would say, is applied knowledge. Da'at is what connects the more heavenly spheres and the intellectual spheres to practice, to the world itself. So it's applied knowledge. Yeah. Yeah. No. Sure.
How would you, and I know the word, I mean, I know what the words mean, but how would you differentiate Chokhmah from Bina?
Good question. So Chokhmah is really the spark of wisdom. Chokhmah is not what we create. It's what God creates for us. It's I would say, like, if you have a startup, you were enlightened with an idea. Where did that idea come from? It just entered your mind and permeated your consciousness. That was a gift from God. That's Chokhmah. But Bina really is your creation in many ways, or at least your formation. And that is when you take that genius idea that just entered your mind and you develop it yourself. Okay, so I have this idea to invent this. How's it going to look like? Then you have to actually draw a plan and talk about all the details. Then that is the application of that wisdom and intelligence together. By the way, that is an interesting word, because that also means intimacy. It's not just applied knowledge. In fact, when Adam had intimacy with his wife, Eve, in order to give birth to Cain and Hevel, to their children, it says, Vayeda Adam et Chava ishto, that Adam knew Eve. In many ways, that achieves this intimacy between heaven and earth. It's what connects the heavenly with the earthly, or the spiritual with the physical. That's that. That is very, very powerful. Yeah. A good question. Okay. Let's continue a little bit more, just a little bit more. Bottom of page 10. Unless there's other questions again, disagreements or whatever. Okay. Bottom of 10. Who wants to continue? Beth, you can continue. Or Sue, you can continue. Whoever wants to. Hmm.
Is in itself not at all a supernatural phenomenon. It is a part of a familiar realm of experience, an integral piece of life, which may even seem ordinary and commonplace because of its traditional rootedness in the system of its thought. When we are in the act of creating an angel, we have no perception of the angel being created. And this act seems to be a part of the whole structure of the practical material world in which we live.
Right. Yeah, I just want to stop you here because I think it's an important point to ponder. You know, like someone asked me yesterday, and I think it's a question that's applicable to everybody. It says, in the life of a rabbi, how much of your day do you have to plan, and how much of your day is planned for you? It's like falls on you. Is it like 60-40 or 70-30? I said it's 100-0. Says, what do you mean? And says, well, whether you want it or not, everything is planned by God. Even that which I plan is planned by God. So it's 100-0. And this is exactly what this is saying, that angels are very much a part of our world, whether we want it or not. And God, at the end of the day, is anyway in control. And if he wants to change things, he'll either send angels or he'll do it himself or he'll do it through you. But it's very much a part of our reality. Everything is God's reality. At the end of the day, whether we think that we can shape it or not, doesn't matter. God works through us. And he'll decide when to add an angel or not to add an angel. But they are part of our reality, whether we admit it or not. That's how God works.